Project Genesis. Why Kevin Warsh Changes Everything. A narrative podcast by ICT. Let me start with this. Kevin Warsh is not just a Fed chair nominee. He's a signal. And if you've been following my macro work, Project Genesis, New Bretton Woods, the AI productivity thesis, then what's happening right now shouldn't surprise you at all. It should feel inevitable. President Trump just nominated Kevin Warsh to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. Most people are treating this like a normal political appointment. It isn't. This is a regime move. Here's the part people are missing. Kevin Warsh doesn't come from the modern Fed priesthood. He doesn't speak like an academic, and he doesn't think in press releases. He thinks in markets. Warsh was trained at Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Sloan. He worked at Morgan Stanley. He served in the White House. And at 35 years old, 35, he became the youngest Fed governor in history. Then something important happened. He lived through the global financial crisis from inside the room. And unlike most of the Fed, he didn't come out of it pretending everything went great. During the GFC, Warsh dissented against massive quantitative easing. He warned publicly that QE would distort price discovery, inflate asset prices, and quietly expand the Fed's mandate beyond anything it was designed to be. At the time, he was called a hawk. History calls him early. Now here's where Project Genesis starts to click. After leaving the Fed, Warsh didn't go into academia. He went to work with Stanley Druckenmiller. And if you understand Druckenmiller, you understand everything. Liquidity, reflexivity, second-order effects, capital flows over narratives. That matters, because Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also comes from that same lineage. That means Treasury and the Fed, possibly for the first time in decades, are now aligned around how the system actually works, not how textbooks say it should. That alignment is the core of Project Genesis. Now let's talk about the so-called Warsh pivot. People still call him a hawk. They're lazy. Warsh hasn't changed principles. He's recognized a new regime. And I've been writing about this for a year now. Artificial intelligence is not inflationary. It is deflationary productivity. When output per worker explodes, old interest rate models break. Warsh gets this. He's been openly critical of the Fed for keeping rates too high, arguing that AI-driven productivity allows growth without inflation. That's not politics, that's math. And then there's the line. The quote that tells you everything you need to know about how Warsh sees the future. If you're under 40, Bitcoin is your gold. That's not a crypto bro talking. That's a former Fed governor acknowledging a generational shift in store-of-value preference. And it perfectly matches what I've written again and again. Bitcoin isn't rebellion. It's discipline. It's not replacing the dollar. It's signaling stress in the system. Warsh has also said Bitcoin doesn't make him nervous, that the technology is just software. Exactly. Software is productivity. Software is leverage. Software is optionality. That's Genesis thinking. Now let's zoom out. Warsh has used a phrase that should scare entrenched institutions: regime change. That likely means less balance sheet bloat, more room for real rate cuts. A Fed focused on price stability and employment, not climate policy and social signaling. Less talking, fewer speeches, clearer signals. In other words, a Fed that stops trying to manage narratives and starts managing money. That's a direct reversal of the Powell era. And yes, Jerome Powell represents the old regime. Warsh represents what comes after. So what happens if this actually gets implemented? Simple. Lower short-term rates accelerate growth. AI absorbs inflation pressure. Risk assets reprice upward. Balance sheet discipline restores credibility. High growth, low inflation, real productivity. That's not fantasy. That's Project Genesis. Here's the part I want you to really sit with. For years, people said this thesis was theoretical. It isn't anymore. Personnel is policy. And now the personnel matches the architecture. With Bretton at Treasury and Warsh at the Fed, monetary and fiscal policy are finally speaking the same language. Not politics, not ideology, systems. The speculation phase is over. Kevin Warsh is the nominee. If confirmed, he won't just be Fed chair. He'll be the monetary executor of a regime shift that's been hiding in plain sight. And if Project Genesis is right, this is the moment everything changes.